As a speech pathologist, it's one of my roles when I'm working with people with dementia to help their caregivers, you here today, and other people close to them, to learn how to make the most of their communication. Message is a set of 7 practical strategies that can help support communication with people with dementia. And each letter of message stands for a slightly different strategy.
Well, Ron moved in with Steve and me about 6 months ago because of his dementia. Ron's Steve's dad, and we were starting to get a bit worried about him living on his own. It just didn't seem like he could look after himself. Day to day, I'm usually the one at home with Ron. We've always got along really well.
My wife Isabel was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 3 years ago, and I suppose you'd say she's in the middle stages. She still lives at home with me, and I'm a primary carer, though we do get some help from the family when they can.
Now, everyone's situation will be different, and not everything that we talk about today will happen to you, but we hope that you can take on board and try out some of these strategies and just see what works for you. So the message strategies start with M for maximise attention.
I used to have good chats with Ron, but lately I'm finding it harder to get him involved.
You're doing a good job. Where are you going to put it all?
Yes, one of the first things that you'll need to be aware of is that dementia makes it difficult for people to focus their attention. So to get Ron involved in a conversation, you may need to attract his attention first. You can do that by saying his name, moving to his eye level, and making eye contact.
Hi, Ron.
Also, to help Ron keep his attention on what you're saying, it's best if you can avoid distractions like the TV or the radio, but make sure you ask first.
That's fine.
And it also helps if you stay in one place while you're talking and keep the eye contact going. Well, the other thing that can be difficult is talking in places that are noisy or busy, like shops and cafes, or where there are several people talking at once, like when you have your family around. So, if you can, try and keep it so that people speak to Ron one at a time. It's hard for someone with dementia to switch their attention from one person to another, and you'll need to help them focus on what each person is saying. So, to maximise a person's attention, you'll need to attract their attention, avoid distraction, and speak one at a time. The next strategy is E for expression and body language.
I've learnt a couple of helpful things along the way from other people I've met. One important thing I've found is that Isabel can still pick up on my feelings even when I don't say anything, just from my manner. So I try to be relaxed and calm when I'm with her, even if she has asked me where the children are for the 27th time today.
Yes, that's a good point. People with dementia can still understand non-verbal communication, like your facial expression and your tone of voice and your body language. I know it's not always easy, but if you can appear relaxed, it can rub off on them. And the same is true for irritation as well, unfortunately.
Oh yes, if I do snap back, she can get quite agitated.
You can also use your expression and body language to show interest in what the person is saying, which is very important, of course. And the other quite helpful thing about non-verbal communication is that you can use things like a smile or a nod or eye contact to help you keep communicating as the dementia progresses. So, in your expression and body language, try to appear relaxed and calm and show interest. The next strategy is S for simple. Keep it simple.
One of the things that Ron and I do every week is to have a big dinner on Sunday. I find it works best if I only ask for one thing at a time. If I ask for too much, Ron tends to lose track of what I wanted.
Yes, that's true. It's difficult for a person with dementia to follow long sentences with several pieces of information. For example, could you get the potatoes out of the cupboard and find me the peeler and the chopping board? So try to keep the content short, simple and familiar.
Ron, can you get me the potatoes from that cupboard?
Sure.
At the moment, Isabel and I, we're keeping busy putting together a family tree album with both our stories in there. So I need to find out more about her childhood, which means I'm having to ask her more questions.
Well, Arnold, you can keep things simple in the way you ask questions, especially if you need to find out something specific. It's much easier for a person with dementia to answer if you give one or two clear choices.
When you were in Amsterdam, did you speak Dutch or did you speak English the whole time?
I English all the time.
Oh, okay.
Or if that becomes difficult, just ask one thing at a time.
You want chicken tonight?
That's the one.
If you ask an open question like, what would you like for dinner? The person has to think of an answer, which can be quite hard for them.
Yes, another tip that I've been given is that if I say, do you remember, following questions like, what did your mother do? Do you remember? Then Isabel seems to forget the actual question.
Yes, that makes sense, Arnold, because of the memory limitation. So you will need to allow for that. But remember that you can keep your language simple without talking down to the person. So to keep things simple, just use short, simple and familiar sentences and give clear choices when you're asking for information. Well, the next S stands for support the conversation.
I used to think silences in conversation was a bad thing. But I found Ron needs a bit of silence sometimes. It gives him time to think. So what did Steve end up making you for breakfast?
I don't. Cereal, wasn't it? And toast.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, giving time is really important, Amanda. Dementia slows the person's thinking, and so by leaving a longer than usual pause, you're giving Ron the time he needs to understand what you've said and come up with a response. And as well as leaving extra time, you may also need to help the person find the word they're looking for.
And the other thing that I liked, at the fact when we do go to Sydney, we stay at Matt's on the
In the tower.
in the tower.
You get some fantastic views from up there, don't you?
You'll need to find a balance between giving them enough time to think of the word, but not leave them struggling. And best to do it naturally and conversationally rather than drawing attention to the problem. Another type of support that you might need to give is just repeating things when the person has trouble understanding, and that gives them a chance to catch any information that they might have missed first time around. And then if they're still having trouble, you can try rephrasing.
Nana, can we have a look at your photo book? Where did you go on this first trip?
First trip was New York.
New York must have been really exciting.
Sorry, love?
New York must have been really exciting. A trip to New York. That must have been a big thing for you.
Oh, yes, it was a real trip. Lovely.
Isabel can't always follow what I'm saying over a whole conversation, especially when someone comes in and interrupts, like our granddaughter Sophie, and to ask a question, and well, then I pretty much have to start over again.
Yes, the memory limitations make it difficult for her to keep track of what's been said, and interruptions make it even harder. So, to help her follow the conversation, you'll need to make it clear what or who you're talking about right from the start, and then just slip in some extra little reminders of the topic every now and again. It helps if you repeat the main words rather than saying words like it or they, so that she doesn't need to carry that information from earlier in the conversation.
Simon sent us a Christmas card. In fact, I think his card was one of the first that arrived this year. It's on top here somewhere.
Did we send him one?
Yes, his was one of the first cards that we sent out as well.
That's good.
I normally start with the overseas people so that we can get the overseas cards out on time.
If you do get interrupted, you'll need to say something like, "Oh, yes, we were talking about the Christmas cards." And of course, you'll need to give the same kind of support for each new topic that comes up. So, to support the conversation, you'll need to give the person time. Try to help them find the word that they need. Sometimes you could repeat or rephrase what you've said and just give reminders of the topic. So the A stands for our next strategy, assist with visual aids. Visual information can help a person with dementia understand your meaning. For example, you can use gestures and actions when you speak. You might actually be able to show them the object that you're talking about, or maybe even a picture of it.
Would you like milk or juice?
Milk, please.
We were having trouble getting Isabel to come to the dinner table to eat at dinner time. So I decided to include her more in the dinner preparations. I found that if I showed her the cooking and the table placings, then she caught on much better that it was time for dinner.
Yes, she'll still be able to understand the visual cues you get from familiar situations. So using visuals can be really helpful as the person's understanding of spoken words declines. You can assist the person by using visual aids like gestures, actions, objects and pictures. G stands for get their message. In any conversation, you want to get the message that the other person is trying to get across. But this can be more difficult to do with people with dementia, so you'll need to listen and watch and just try to get the meaning.
Oh yeah. There's sometimes when I feel I've got to be a bit of a detective to work out what he's trying to say. He doesn't always pick the right word, but I know he's trying to tell me something. But I always think it's important to remember that he has something to say. He just needs a bit of extra help to get it out properly.
He's another, that little piece he has.
Little piece.
Little square piece that he has.
Oh, you're going to have to give me some more.
No, I'm talking about the little piece with...
Oh, in the garden?
Yeah, little piece in the garden.
The herbs. The herb garden.
Yeah.
The herb garden.
I think it needs weeding every time I look at it.
You might find that you can encourage the person to give you more information if you go, as in go on, or you could reflect back what you think they're saying to give them a chance to confirm it or perhaps to add some more information.
I find I can work out a lot of what Isabel is saying if I just watch her. From her face, I can tell how she's feeling, and when she's talking about a particular thing, then she will often look at it, and that will sometimes help me.
Yes, those non-verbal messages can give you a clue. And as speech becomes more and more difficult, it becomes important to watch the person's behaviour, because that may be their way of communicating.
Are you hungry, dear?
So to get their message, listen, watch, and just try to work out the meaning and pay attention to the person's behaviour and their non-verbal messages. The final strategy is E for encourage and engage in communication. The basic human need for interaction with other people is still there through all the stages of dementia. So it's good if you can encourage conversation on topics that are interesting and familiar to the person. Perhaps using photos, books, or a favourite item as a trigger.
Yes, I find Isabel likes looking through the old photo albums and talking about the old days when we were young.
Yes, memories from long ago are often easier to remember and to talk about than are more recent things. And you may find that you hear the same story a few times over, but that doesn't matter. It's keeping up the communication that's the important part. Sometimes you'll be able to get the person talking by asking a general question.
So what was it like living in Emerald?
Emerald's a town which is about 150 miles from Rockhampton. When I lived there, the population was very small, only about 2,000 people.
Yeah, that is small.
If it's difficult for the person to answer a general question, you could follow up with a question that suggests a possible answer, just to help them get started.
So how long have you lived in Queensland for?
Oh, God knows.
Maybe about 40 years?
Oh, must be.
If you can, encourage other family and friends to talk with the person as well, because the more opportunity they get, the better. And one thing to remember when you're chatting though, is that it's best not to ask things that come across like test questions.
Yeah, I used to think that asking Ron the date or how old he was, that sort of thing, was giving him practice and helping him remember. But I found that it doesn't help him to remember these things. All it does is upset him when he can't remember.
And sometimes you'll find that people with dementia will get confused about reality and that this can upset them and you. If this happens, it's best not to argue with what they're saying. What's important is to show that you understand their feelings and to reassure them. Then sometimes you might be able to find a safer aspect of the topic to talk about.
Yes, Isabel often asks about the kids as if they were still little. And I've found the best way to deal with it is not to say they're not here or they've grown up, but to talk about more general memories of the children. Then she seems to become calmer and we can get on with what we were doing before.
Yes, overall, the goal is to keep up the communication and make it as enjoyable as possible.
The Pride of Erin's my favourite, yes.
So, try to take any opportunity to encourage communication and engage the person in conversation on interesting and familiar topics. And get family and friends involved too. So, the important things to remember from the message strategies are: maximise attention by focusing the person's attention, by avoiding distraction and speaking one at a time. Watch your expression and your body language and your tone of voice so that you appear relaxed and interested. Keep it simple by using short, simple sentences with familiar words and by giving clear choices when you ask questions. support the conversation by giving the person extra time, helping them to find words, repeating sentences when they don't understand, and reminding them of the topic of the conversation. Assist with visual aids, including gestures, actions, objects and pictures. And try to get their message by listening, watching, and working out the meaning. Also use the person's behaviour and non-verbal messages to help you understand. And finally, encourage communication and engage with people with dementia by chatting about interesting and familiar topics and encouraging conversation with family and friends.